Thank you. Thank you. The next one, that is the outline. Now, my topic for discussion has been introduced, and we are going to discuss updates on the management of psoriasis, management guidelines for psoriasis. And these psoriasis have been universally adopted by all the global dermatological associations as listed there. Now, in considering the classification guidelines, it is critical to standardize criteria before embarking on the choice and the treatment. One of them is to comprehensively diagnose psoriasis, utilizing clinical and pathological data as necessary. And this one has been covered by previous speakers. And then the next requirement is the severity classification, which, according to the evidence, published evidence, and this evidence is at the apex of the strength of evidence from systemic reviews of randomized clinical trials. So all the evidence then requires that psoriasis be classified according to the severity. And the severity takes into account the psoriasis area and severity index and the dermatological life quality index as outlined by the speakers in the first session. So there are only two classifications for purposes of research and management outcomes. So mild psoriasis is classified as psoriasis vulgaris of psoriasis area and severity index, which are going to refer as PSI of less than 10, and dermatological life quality index of less than 10. Anything more than 10 PSI and 10 DLQI is considered moderate to severe for purposes of research and management. This, of course, includes the psoriasis syndrome, as Osea has already highlighted. Psoriasis, as adopted by the World Health Assembly in 2014, was recognized as a systemic immune-mediated disease with genetic predisposition, incurable, and therefore psoriasis is everything, all the clinical manifestations in the systems, systemic disease. So severity therefore captures the systemic manifestations as part of the diagnosis. Now, the tools for evaluation of psoriasis area and severity index are usually captured by the PASI, psoriasis area and severity index, and all of you are dermatologists and you're familiar with this tool. There's another tool called the Physician General Assessment, which is also used often in clinical trials and treatment outcomes. Then the dermatological life quality index, you are familiar with it. It is a standard tool that is used in the majority of the guidelines. So psoriasis, therefore, having been classified into two, mild and moderate to severe, the guidelines on mild severity plaque psoriasis have not changed. They remain the same, and they include topical agents as listed there. vitamin D analogs, calcipotriol, calcineurin inhibitors, phototherapy, anthralinta. And it has been proclaimed that steroids, by virtue of their serious complications, are not preferred, and most of the guidelines suggested that steroids should be obsolete in the management of psoriasis, although there are a few dissenting opinions to that effect. So, moderate to severe psoriasis, the management updates are numerous, and they include the conventional systemic therapy of the non-biologics, which we have used over the decades, and they include methotrexate, retinoids, and cyclosporine. Now, these non-biologics, as they are referred at the moment, have a lower efficacy, and they have an increased frequency of serious adverse effects, which are referred to by the FDA as black warnings. Then the second class of systemic therapy is biologics. And as we all know, biologics have been developed after extensive research using animal models, and there's a ton of publications to that effect. And they have been approved by the FDA of the USA. And they are approved only for moderate to severe psoriasis. We are talking about psoriasis, moderate to severe plaque psoriasis, and the psoriatic syndrome, inclusive of psoriatic arthritis. Approval for psoriasis with other comorbidities, although they are well documented, but there is lack of credible evidence of adequate strength for recommendation of the guidelines. Is still pending. Psoriasis with metabolic syndrome, with nephropathy, with neuropsychiatric disorders, and all those other comorbidities, the approvals are pending because of lack of data for which is required for the approvals. Biologics are, and this has been covered by Dr. Angwenyi and Mercy Kariuki very well. So I will not dwell on this much beyond what they have already presented to us. They are actually monoclonal antibodies developed through genetic engineering, either human or humanized, and they target inhibition of specific signal transducers and cytokines in the immunopathogenesis of psoriasis. As we shall see shortly, they are superior to the non-biologics in efficacy and safety, provided that the risk factors and adverse effects have been excluded. However, all of them without exception, including the non-biologics, are one is at a risk of very serious infections, and other target specific variable adverse effects. In the developing world, cost is a major limitation to the use of biologics because they are very expensive for the average citizen in the developing world, including China. One of the papers that I read about China was that they are yet to implement biologics fully because of lack of evidence from their population. Now, this one has been covered very ably by Priscilla Angwenyi, and it is a diagram illustrating the pathophysiology of psoriasis, where you have the plasmacytoid dendritic cells interacting with the keratinocytes and macrophages, and the null T cells after activation to produce those cytokines, including TNF-alpha, transforming myeloid to myeloid dendritic cells in the lymph nodes to produce other cells, immune-competent cells, through interleukin-12, interleukin-12-13, the P40 subunit, and interleukin-23, activation through of TH17, TH22, and further application, more TNF-alpha, interferon gamma, more TNF-alpha, interleukin-22, to activate keratinocytes through the inflammatory cascade, leading to the clinical features that we see of proliferation, vascular changes, and the entire clinical profile. So this one is the basis for the biologics, which inhibit specific cytokines in the cascade of activation of psoriasis. So one of the major concerns in the guidelines is efficacy. And here I have a slide summarizing the efficacy of all the available biologics, excluding fumarates. Apremilast is at the bottom there. The slide is not complete down there. And this is a systemic review of the efficacy of the available systemic treatments. You can see that the non-biologics have got a lower percentage of attainment of PSI 75 at week 16 for methotrexate. It is slightly lower than acitretin, which is 47% at 75% PSI at week 12, and cyclosporin has a higher percentage of attainment of PGA1. PGA1 is almost complete clearance of the lesions at week 8. However, the non-biologics have got similar adverse effects, contraindications, and the black label warnings. If you look at the biologics, there are those which are inhibit TNF-alpha. And you can see they have got performance of somewhere in the range of, generally from the range excluding etanercept, from more than 70 to more than 90%, you see. And this is achieved from the systemic reviews at week 10, for week 10, 16, and 12 for the TNF-alpha inhibitors. Ustekinumab, you have close to 70%. So about an amount of 70% at week 12. The second column here is comparison with placebo. These are placebo-controlled efficacy profiles. So you can see the biologics have got a better efficacy compared to the non-biologics, and placebo at the various timing times, usually around week 12, week 16. When you consider the adverse effects of systemic therapies, all of them without exception, including the non-biologics, they are they predispose to very serious infections, and the serious infections include TB, they include herpes simplex, pneumonia, urinary tract infections. Any of those infections are very frequent with systemic therapies. Specifically, Specifically, the non-biologics have got those black label warnings through FDA, and they risk systemic toxicity in the lung, in the kidney, hematological system for methotrexate, acitretin, toxicity, heterogeneity, triglycerides, and so on, similar to cyclosporine, given a lower efficacy. The biologics, just like all the other systemic treatments, have got the contraindication of any of those serious effects on infection, serious infections. Particularly the TNF-alpha group, they are contraindicated where there's demyelination, where there is, of course, serious infections. Satralizumab, if you must give up a biologic in pregnancy and lactation, it is preferred, but of course, in pregnancy, nothing is indicated which is not supported by widely conducted clinical trials. Ustekinumab, more recent, does not have any of those specific indications, but as Priscilla said, it is the data is still inadequate. Just like for the guselkumab, and there is risankizumab, which are interleukin 23 inhibitors. Interleukin 17 inhibitors are contraindicated in inflammatory bowel disease. They always lead to mucocutaneous candidiasis. And apremilast leads to weight loss, ear disturbances, amongst others. This is just a summary of the safety precaution. And so, in conclusion, regarding the biologics, they have a very rapid onset, long-term efficacy, safety forever, provided that the contraindications are excluded. They are the right choice for patients in order to optimize performance where the indications where there is no contraindication. But the data that we have at the moment is inadequate to really make conclusive recommendations as per the reviews. Now, before treatment is started, there are some absolute contraindications for any of those systemic treatments. And we have talked about serious infections. Even if patient has a sensitivity to on the product, that is contraindicated. Crohn's disease, heart failure, those are absolute contraindications. Relative contraindications as per the class of biologics, if you have depression, neuropsychiatric disease, brodalumab is a relative contraindication. Demyelination, particularly the TNF-alpha inhibitors, malignancies, as you know, particularly the TNF-alpha, they also inhibit apoptosis. So although the risk of malignancy is not increased, but we have insufficient data. In pregnancy, nothing should be used unless it is absolutely necessary. If there is planned surgery, then one needs to be very, very cautious. And of course, any of those in history of those infections because of the chronic relapsing nature. Vaccines, live-attenuated vaccines, must not be given in the course of treatment with biologics. They must be given before, at least 2 to 4 weeks before, for the live-attenuated vaccines. But the inactivated vaccines should also be given before starting treatment. And even during treatment, they can be given as per the recommendations. Laboratory workup is necessary, and this should be frequent as per the indication. But initially, it must be done. One must do a chest X-ray to rule out TB, must do serology of herpes viruses, A, B, and C. They must do liver function tests, and HIV serology. then one must consider the comorbidities and the populations at risk, like healthcare workers, people who work with soil and water, pet handlers, eating undercooked foods, including meat and eggs, traveling to underdeveloped countries. Those are communities, people who are at risk of opportunistic infections, and the patients must be cancelled. Next slide. Now, in the course of systemic therapy, the treatment goals for treatment goals and transitioning. Short-term goals, including thorough patient education and briefing on how you're going to give the drugs. The biologics are usually subcutaneous, but there are others which are given orally, like apremilast, the non-biologics, methotrexate, cyclosporine, azathioprine. Must discuss how the effects they have, how they, in terms of improvement, efficacy. The patients must know how frequently they're going to be monitored. And the cost. Cost is, again, very critical, because if you have no funds to afford these drugs, then they are not available. And the PSI and DLQI are to be done at the beginning and every 3 months for a year, and then 6 monthly. If there is a satisfactory response, that is defined as a PSI of less than 50% improvement, or DLQI improvement by 5 points. DLQI is usually out of 30. By week 16, then you consider reviewing the treatment for modification. Long-term therapy, by the end of the year, the PSA should have improved by 90% where there's a response. If that does not occur, you review the treatment. Transitioning of drug treatment, if you are transitioning from the non-biologicals to biologicals by virtue of inadequate response, you can just give them without a washout period. Transitioning non-biologicals into combinations with our biologicals, we have insufficient information at this time. Next slide. Now, the COVID-19 has been discussed extensively. I just want to summarize that at the beginning of December 2019, the patient with psoriasis posed a question as to what the safety profile of systemic treatments was. You remember there was a very major peak in Italy, Spain, Europe, showed that patients with psoriasis on systemic treatment at a lower risk of COVID-19 than general population at 0.2 compared to 0.3 in the general population. So the current consensus guidelines is that psoriasis patients with active COVID-19 should discontinue all systemic therapy until they recover, and then they should be reviewed for possible restarting. Patients with risk factors or comorbidities should be guided and advised according to the choice of the non-biologics. And we should say here that non-biologics are still part of the recommendations for systemic treatment, and they are given worldwide, depending on the appropriateness given those factors, including cost. Next slide. So in summary, the conclusions from the updates on treatment guidelines is the patient-centered education on everything on the diagnosis, goals, and choice of treatment, exclusion of contraindication, and education the patient on the efficacy and adverse effect, advising the patient on the cost of the treatment modality, monitoring of the indicators for response, DLQI and PSI, as outlined above, and to ensure that, to monitor and ensure that the goals of treatment are attained in the course of treatment, and review the treatment if necessary. That is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.